We'll do quick introductions when we get everybody on board. And I don't know if, among the K group working group, Lisa, Rodney, do we know who else we're expecting?
Well,
Mark.
we just got Mark. I don't think I was expecting anybody from the Pathkeepers beyond the
Okay.
4 of us.
Great.
Cassandra joined. I know that David Aranda was going to try to join. I'm not sure he'll make it because he had another meeting.
Okay. Well, we have you, Cassandra.
David is here.
Oh, great.
Great.
And David, is David there? Okay.
Hi.
Sorry.
Let's see here.
I'm here.
We
Mark.
see you. There's Robert put the intro in. I see. Am I missing let's see here. Okay, it's David, you're on by phone. Yeah.
I'm on. Yeah.
Okay. All right, why don't we start? We'll go across the top. So first, welcome to the Berkeley Pathfinders for joining us. We appreciate you joining us. And this is our work group on the Kensington Paths effort. We are been working on now for a while to try to bring the paths under public ownership, at least some of the paths, and upgrade them and look at how they're maintained. And Contra Costa County Public Works has been staffing this effort with a consultant's help, and we appreciate that. And we have a great work group of Kensington residents, and so we welcome the Berkeley effort. It was a lot to learn from Berkeley. So we'll get right into it. We'll start with introductions. I see across the top, Terrence.
Yeah, hi, I'm Terrence Salonga. I'm with City of Berkeley Public Works. I work in engineering. I manage a sidewalk program, which the pathways are a part of. So I've been involved in that
Great.
Since 2020, 2021. And
Great. Well, great. See anybody else from Berkeley, City of Berkeley?
Just me.
Okay, and then so Jocelyn, our County Public Works, you introduce yourself and the consultants from the county.
Sure, I'm
There you
Jocelyn.
go. We got Public Works folks. You speak common language.
Yes, we do. So I'm Jocelyn LaRock. I am the division manager of Engineering Services Division, and with me is Jason Chen and Larry Thies, and they can introduce themselves. Go for it. Larry first. We can't hear you. So can't hear you.
Larry?
Yeah.
Larry, we can't hear you. Jason?
Let me try again. You hear me now?
There you
Yeah.
go.
Sorry. My apologies. Larry Thies. Our team is providing assistance to Contra Costa County on pathway projects. Both Jason and I used to work for local agencies that have had similar pathway sort of bringing into the city system. So we're trying to help navigate for the county, maybe a potential special district, and also how to go with the maintenance of that district.
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Hello everyone, my name is Jason Chen and I work with Larry Thies in assisting the county. Thank you.
And we'll go to others. Lisa?
Yeah, hi, Lisa Corona. I've been involved with the Kensington Pathkeepers, and I'm really looking forward to sharing information that Berkeley has with the Contra Costa County Group.
Great. Rodney and Sarah?
Yep. Roddy Paul and
Sarah Paul,
Kensington Pathkeepers.
and 25-year residents of Kensington.
Right. Cassandra from the Community Services District.
Yeah, I'm an elected official from the KPP CSD, and I have been wandering the paths for 27 years and living in Kensington that long.
Great. Mark.
Hi, I'm Mark Altenberg. I've been living in Kensington for, I can't believe it, 40 years.
Wow.
And
Okay.
we live on a path number 9, the light path. And we've been founding members of the Path Keepers. And we're just trying to keep this issue going forward so that we improve the paths in Kensington. Just real quickly, I made a pamphlet that has a map of the paths in it. And we've been distributing that around this town.
Great.
And we're really interested in hearing from the Berkeley Pathfinders.
And Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie Bowen. I've been with the Berkeley Path Wanderers since 2000, and in around 2003, I started being the head of path building because Berkeley, sort of like Kensington, had a bunch of paths, well, more. We had 50 paths that showed up on a map, but they didn't exist on the ground. And so we started working with Berkeley City engineers, Public Works Engineering Department, and together they seemed glad to have the paths exist, even though not concrete and up to total code, because they're important for egress.
And that's what we're going to hear about. Right.
Yeah, so we've been working on them for 20 years.
Great. David Aranda from the Community Services District.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Aranda. I'm the interim general manager and have taken a love of the paths and would love to see some action in the next 6 months to a year.
Great. Janet.
I am Janet Byron. I'm the current president of Berkeley Path Wanderers Association. My term ends at the end of the year, so I'm outgoing.
Great. Thanks. Is it pronounced, is it Zion?
Zion. Yeah, Zion Fox.
Zion.
Zion.
Zion. Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
I think of Zion. I think of Zion National Park. Right.
Yeah, it's close enough. I'm a new member of the Kensington Path Working Group, although I've lived in Kensington for many decades, and I'm also professionally a trail planner at a local land trust.
Okay, which land trust?
The Peninsula Open Space Trust.
Oh yeah, that's great. Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah.
Yep.
And Robert from my office.
Thank you, John. Robert, aide to Supervisor Joya. Welcome all Berkeley Pathfinders folks. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Robert Rogers and a lover of Kensington and public spaces.
Great. And so we're going to get, I think we covered it. Oh, Bob. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, Bob Gomez, Berkeley Path Wanderers, retired Caltrans. And I lead path building. And we're doing currently doing a lot of maintenance on paths.
Great. Well, we're really looking forward to this. So I know we're going to turn it over to Berkeley, and we're hoping in a half hour to hear about planning and collaboration, maintenance, implementation, funding, and liability, right? And then we'll have the remaining time for questions and answers. We're trying to be done by 4. If we run over a little for questions and answers, I guess we could, but we'll turn it over to Burke I'm not sure if it's the city or the Path Wanderers first, but I'm turning it over to Berkeley.
Do you want us to go through the questions?
Yeah, like, so what we have on the list, yes. So what in that, how they the A through E sort of provide the structure for how you want to talk about this. Yes.
Okay, so I'll start. And so the first question is planning and collaboration. How do Berkeley Path Wanderers staff and Path Wanderers plan and implement improvements for Berkeley paths? How do you collaborate? So I'm going to start, and then I'll hand it over to Bob and Charlie and Terrence. The first thing is, like, there's sort of 2 tracks. Path Wanderers does a fair amount of maintenance and path building kind of on its own with the guidance of the city. But we've done a lot of building of wood step paths. We do ongoing maintenance. So we have maintenance work parties twice a month now. And then we have a path building team, which is led by Bob Gomez, that goes out 2 mornings a week, and they spend a few hours either building paths or doing maintenance on paths. And then there's a second track, which is our relationship with the city of Berkeley. And did we lose Terrence?
It looks like it.
Oh, shoot. Well, anyway, hopefully he'll come back in. So we have a very good, close working relationship with the city of Berkeley. We meet with them every, I don't know, 6 weeks, something like that, a small group of us. The city had a $50,000 annual budget. Oh, here's Terrence, good. For paths, they recently this year increased it to $150,000. And then there's also been funding, designated funding in the T1 bond that I think was 2016. There was $200,000 in that bond. And so Terrence has basically, you know, we've been working with him to prioritize various projects. And I think in recent years, he's been kind of drawing on sidewalk funds as appropriate. And we also—
You said that, how much is the annual? 150,000 is the current maintenance budget?
Well, it's just raised this year. It's been 50,000.
Sorry, I got booted off, so I might have missed a lot. To step in here because it sounds like you're talking about money, and I'm the expert in the money for the city's end. We typically in the past we've spent about 50K, or we've budgeted about 50K for paths. It wasn't until this year we got a budget referral from City Council to spend 150K specifically towards lighting, signage, and handrails. But that's only a one-time thing. Typically, 50K is sort of consolidated within the sidewalk program budget. But you know, that's plus or minus depending on needs elsewhere. Obviously, if we have more money available in the sidewalk program.
Is the 50 just for the paths, or is it other things?
It's for the paths.
Okay.
Correct.
And the 150 is one-time money.
Is a one-time thing for paths, but specific.
And the bond, what was the bond measure, the bond money?
That was
T1. Correct.
And how much is that? How much is that?
For the path specifically, we had about 200K budgeted one time. That went to one specific project where we did some maintenance and improvements on various paths throughout Berkeley.
But keep in mind that that's over 140 paths versus our 10 or 11.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and we also, Path Wanderers, every 5 years, volunteers do a survey of all the paths on one day. And if you want me to share my, oh, you know what, I'll put a link in the chat to the survey. But we monitor just damage on the paths. Handrails are a great need. And we're also interested in putting in lighting and wayfinding signage and safety improvements for things like, you know, crosswalks to cross the street. And we put together, for a bond measure, we put together kind of working with the city of Berkeley, a kind of a budget for this 140 paths. And it was about, I don't know, $5 million, around, a little under that, for all the things that we think the paths need. And also Path Wanderers has been raising money to buy handrails in recent years. And so we've been able to purchase, or I think 6, I don't know what the exact number is. In the last year, we bought 4 handrails, and the handrails cost us between $15,000 and $25,000. They cost the city probably double that based on contracting needs.
Yeah, about 25 to 50 in most cases.
Yeah, we don't have the same requirements that the city has. So I think that gives a pretty good overview of how we collaborate. And then getting on to like Bob or Charlie, do you have anything to add?
One thing, in case anybody was horrified by the $5 million figure, that includes building 15 to 20 new paths that don't exist on the ground right now. And that's expensive. That involves surveys and neighbors and all kinds of stuff. So that amount includes that big initial capital expense. So
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, including like money to clear encroachments, you know, legal,
Yeah.
like sort of an estimate, like how much money would we need for the lawyers to help us clear encroachments? Because the Path Wanderers has built 38 paths, and the ones we're sort of getting to the point where every path has some kind of problem, you know, that needs to be resolved. Like there's a gate, or there's a hot tub, or, you know, or maybe we can't do a wood step path. The city needs to build a, you know, might need to build a cement path, which is a lot more expensive. And Charlie, I should have mentioned too, that Charlie, in her role, she, like when we're building a new path, she meets with all the neighbors and sort of lays the groundwork for putting, you know, taking back the public right of way.
Right, but that is totally backed up by Public Works Engineering.
Yes.
And in many cases, the neighbors don't want to hear from me. They want to hear from Terrence or somebody more.
This is David. I know one thing I can make a certain statement about. We're not going to look at building more. So
yeah,
from our standpoint, we'd appreciate the focus on costs and all the different things that go along with it, ADA, liability, all that, on existing paths that can be an apples to apples measurement for us, realizing that you already have probably 10 times more paths than we'll ever have, but that's kind of what I'd like to stay focused from my standpoint.
Yeah.
And to clarify, when we say new paths, we mean building upon existing right-of-way we have.
Yeah.
We typically have these 10-foot right-of-ways that cut through sort of a block, you know, to circumvent the you know, zigzag nature of our streets and the hills. There are paths that are existing and somewhat in use to varying degrees, but you know, new paths meaning we basically make them more friendly for pedestrians. So I'm not sure what state the Kensington paths are, if they're built out or if they need to be built out. You just, yeah, I'm unfamiliar with the situation there.
It kind of varies. I mean, we have some that are already built out and they're, you know, it's just really repairing them. We have some that are blocked. So it's kind of, there is a range.
Okay.
I do think that concentrating at first on the ones that are not blocked to just get the project going is, you know, more realistic for the budget. We have very little money for this, but you know, the paths are actually mostly in really good condition, the ones that are used. However, you know, when surveyed, there are all these improvements, you know, I mean, they came up with a price tag of 3.5 mil, and you know, there's no way Kensington can afford that. So we're looking to Berkeley to just help us realistically plan, how can we do this with a low budget, you know, with maybe a little help from the county. How can we take ownership of these paths?
Yeah. So you're gonna go through your other points here on our list, right?
Yeah, so maintenance, B is maintenance. How do the Berkeley Path Wanderers staff and Path Wanderers plan and implement routine maintenance for Berkeley paths? And so routine maintenance that we do is we have path maintenance parties where groups of people go out and clear brush and weeds and sweep and pound in rebar. And then, as I told you, we have a path building team that goes out and does more substantial repairs on the wood step paths. And then we have our path survey, which sort of helps guide our work. But often we hear from people out on the trails that there's a problem, and we notice stuff ourselves, like this path is getting overgrown, and then a crew will go out. And then also, we've in the past we've hired weed people, a gardener to go out with a weed whacker and clear some paths. And then we've also been working with the fire department, and they've gone through and done weed cleared vegetation from the paths. And when we're done with the path maintenance party, the city public works department will come and pick up the green waste for us. We just tell them where it is, and they come and collect it. And
actually, that's the
yeah.
Parks Department.
Parks
but
Department, yeah.
They're the ones with the right kind of pickup trucks and everything.
Yeah, yeah. So does that answer the maintenance question? And then Terrence, what about
I'm sorry, could you, so the maintenance, who actually does the maintenance?
well, like we have volunteers who do maintenance, and some people have volunteered to say like sweep a path on a regular basis if it's in their neighborhood. But then public works department, if they get we'll report problems to them that aren't things that we can fix, like problems with the cement or cement steps. Or Terrence, maybe you could take it from there.
Yeah. So I think in this case, we might be talking about maintenance in terms of, well, I guess we should probably take a bigger step back, bigger picture style. There's two different types of paths. We have the concrete staircases, which are sort of the legacy paths. And then we have the newer wood tie rustic trail builds that sort of the path wanderers have been installing and maintaining. So the concrete ones, obviously, that would fall under the public works purview. The more rustic wood ties, the ones that they build, they kind of maintain it with the volunteer parties. I know they also do some maintenance on the concrete staircase in terms of cleaning them, but in terms of the concrete repairs themselves, that would fall under the public works purview. And in terms of, the planning of it all, going back to what Janet had mentioned earlier with the path condition reports, we rely heavily on that just because we don't have the resources to inspect every single path. They go out there every number of years. What is it, 5 years? And inspect these paths, and they note things that are missing, any deterioration. They'll take some photos, and we'll kind of use that as as the first step in planning out our maintenance. And the last time this went out, I wasn't involved, but for this go around, I believe by the end of the year we'll have a path condition report that'll kind of help us plan for the future in terms of where we're repairing paths, how we're spending our money wisely.
Yeah. So Charlie, was that you?
Yeah. We have actually, the way these work parties are organized is there's two people who are volunteer work party leaders, and one of them's retired and one's still working. The one that's retired announces a work party on a weekday once a month, and the one that's still working announces a work party on some path on a Saturday or Sunday. They're usually in the morning. They're always 2 hours. We have a big supply of tools. Path Wanderers owns a big supply of tools. We bring them to the work party, and like Janet said, then the trimmings and weeds and branches or whatever, the Parks Department will come and pick them up if we notify them. So that with two volunteer work parties, sometimes 3 people come and sometimes 13 people come, but we get a lot of, we're getting on top of the maintenance. Every spring there's more, but that we take care of the wood steps, and then we take care of the vegetation on any steps that need it, concrete or wood.
And then if there's something like a tree fell down, or there's a tree right in the middle of the path, then we contact Public Works for sort of larger problems. So I guess, let's see, the next question was implementation. Does Berkeley have design standards for path improvements? What are the goals? Include any ADA requirements? And so Terrence, I'm going to hand that to you.
Yeah, again, going back to
Charlie.
oh, sorry.
And Charlie.
Oh,
It's
okay.
it's you, Terrence.
Yeah, I'll take a whack at it, and then if you have anything to add, Charlie. So yeah, going back to the two different categories of paths, we have the concrete staircases. There, we're kind of going to be using the ProWag. I know that was recently passed as a final rule. It's not yet adopted, but we expect that to be soon. That's the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines. That's issued by the U.S. Access Board. And going to the the rustic trails that the Pathwanders kind of help us build. That's more of the ADA, ABA standards specifically for outdoor use. I believe the Access Board also has some standards related to outdoor trails. Most of what we do is probably going to fall under an exception, though, in terms of trying to meet compliance. Number one being the terrain. And number two, I believe the fact that we use Berkeley Path Wanderers as volunteers, that would allow us an exemption for construction and the prevailing construction practices used. Because we use unskilled volunteer labor, we would not be expected to meet compliance with accessibility, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually really important to the Berkeley Path Wanderers, because code is usually you have to have handrails on both sides of a path. And since we have so many paths in Berkeley with no handrails at all, it's very hard financially to see putting two handrails on one path while 40 others have no handrails at all. So things like that, that exemption is good. And then our paths, and I believe yours also, most of them fall under the terrain exemption because they're only 10 feet wide and they're steep enough that there's no way you could meet that the 8% or whatever the ADA percentage slope is. So
is there this is David again. Terrence, I just want to make sure what I heard correctly is that because the city uses volunteers, you have some exemptions, not only on some of the liability issues, but also on some of the costs prevailing.
When I said prevailing, I meant prevailing construction practices, not the wages themselves. I wasn't specifically talking about anything in terms of costs. I mean, you might save some costs by not having to, cut and fill to make, an ADA compliant slope. But mostly talking about prevailing construction practices as it relates to, volunteer unskilled labor to build out the paths.
So is it possible to have the group sent the public right-of-way accessibility guidelines and also the rustic trail guidelines, and then anything that applies to what you're saying now?
All the possible exemptions.
You said you want that sent? Did I hear that right, David?
Yeah, I would love that, and I think our group might like it in general.
Yeah, we're only a local government, so a lot of these we're not legally held to it necessarily, but we use them as a guideline in case there ever is a point in time where they become, appropriate.
Well, we'll probably be right there with you.
Right, exactly.
I want to make sure our county public works are active and consultant in making sure their questions are answered, because it's always good to hear. So I just wanted to make sure that you're part of asking any questions.
Do you want us to?
Yeah, I do have a question. Thank you, Supervisor Julia. So Terrence, how does it work if, say, a trail user has, see something and they contact the city, and say it's a rustic, in your case, it's a rustic trail. So do you then forward that concern to the Wanderer group, or does the Public Works take care of it? How does it work?
If it's a repair of the step itself, for example, I would send that directly to the Berkeley Path Wanderers. Whoever built it, essentially, I would send it to. If it's some other non-related issue, let's say there's we got one about a wasp nest that was nesting in one of the steps, that would be city. I wouldn't forward that to Path Wanderers. But if it's something that they can help with, repairing some of the wood tie steps, I would send that directly to our friends here, Berkeley Path Wanderers.
Yeah, and we also, it goes the other way. We have a report a problem form on our website, and we encourage people to report things through 511 or 311.
311.
311. Yes. So we'll forward, and we'll get, people will report things to us, and as needed, we report them to the city. So like a missing sign or a step that's cattywampus, or a tree in the way, or whatever it is.
And Terrence, I assume when Public Works take care of any issue, then that's where that $50,000 annual budget is drawn down from, or is that separate?
Depends what it is. If it's just a routine check, site visit, then yeah, that wouldn't draw from 50,000. 50,000 was really for the engineering division. If it was something where our maintenance crew would go out there, they wouldn't charge against that 50,000. But obviously, you could consider that as part of the cost. It just doesn't draw from that 50,000 technically.
So, Terrence, I wanted to follow up on that 50,000. Based on what you just said, is that 50,000 essentially paying for some salary of the engineering staff to be involved in this program?
That's part of it, yes. The other part is, the actual work itself. It just depends. Typically, we try to fund our salaries through different funds. So you'll see projects with different funding sources. And obviously, we don't want to draw from the budget with the least amount. 50,000 isn't really much. And sort of clarify what I said earlier, 50,000 is what we've been getting historically in the program, but that has kind of consolidated with the sidewalk program. So there isn't a separate bucket for paths necessarily, but I kind of use that 50,000 because it's easy to reference, because it does tell you kind of what the city valued our maintenance and improvements for years.
So like
so
the
just so I understand,
the 150,000, that's above the 50,000. Is that?
That's it. Yeah, that's in addition to the
one time
to the 50. Yeah.
So when we have our meeting, Terrence, he gives us a spreadsheet of what we're going to spend the money on, and it might be things like, I don't know, we're working on engineering to build a new path up. Is that Upper Columbia? So things like that, like a substantial amount of money that would be dedicated to a particular thing, putting in a handrail or rebuilding crumbling steps.
Terrence probably
it
knows
sounds
more.
like that $100,000 this one time, or the addition beyond 50,000 is like used for specific capital projects. Like, okay, we're gonna do XYZ on a trail, and that extra money beyond 50,000 is for those purposes. That's what I am gathering from this conversation. Am I understanding correct, Terrence?
I don't know if I quite followed your example. You mind repeating that?
So every year, in normal years, it's $50,000. That is going toward engineering staff time. When you guys do a capital improvement project, like you're going to go add steps or change out stairs or whatever it is, are you budgeting more money beyond the 50,000 for that project?
Yeah, and I also want to make clear the 50,000 just isn't for salary. It just happens to also pay for staff time if the staff bills to that specific project. But again, that 50,000 isn't just solely for salary; it's also for other maintenance and improvements. But yeah, if there were some
so
more,
what would those be?
If there
typically?
was
like,
sorry.
So what would that typically be beyond salaries? Like, trying to understand when we're estimating like maintenance, for example, for a trail, you know, some trails need to be watered, for example. You know, there's landscaping, so there's a water bill, and so that needs to be accounted for. On the Berkeley paths, are there elements that are regular routine costs that you have to pay for that's beyond internal staff time?
Oh yeah. I mean, we have the concrete staircases. They're, you know, nearing 100 years old in some cases. So just having to repair those, that could easily eat up to 50,000. Obviously, we don't have unlimited budget, so it's hard to really put down a number and say, you know, this is how much we would spend every year. Because if we really wanted to repair all of them, we'd be spending, like Janet mentioned earlier, $5 million. But you know, we're trying to repair the most severe ones. That's kind of how our Path Wanderers help. They help prioritize those maintenance costs.
Okay. And are the funds that are allocated, it sounds like some of the one-time increase, you know, on occasion, were probably through some specific tax bond or whatever, you know, these things are passed. Is all these funds that are being used toward this program general fund dollars? There's not a special district set up specifically for this type of improvement, right? It's a general fund allocation.
Exactly. We have general fund, fire fund, sidewalk fund. Those are our main ones. Obviously, not including the bond measure, like you mentioned.
Okay.
Actually, Terrence, it sounds to me what you're saying is any routine maintenance, if you get called for something smaller, vegetation, like maybe like someone mentioned, Jenna mentioned, a tree fell down, you don't charge it to
loose
this 50.
handrail.
This 50, yeah, this 50,000 seems to be for like to accomplish a one-time project, right? Like, you know, a stair that needs significant repair more than just a quick routine repair or a new stair rail. That's you try to plan for this 50,000 every year. So it's almost like a smaller capital project money. But
Right.
any routine staff going out there to clear debris or anything,
Right.
that comes with totally something separate, right?
That would be something separate. That would be a different department. That would be parks. So I can't speak to the costs associated with that. Yeah, I'm speaking strictly from a public works standpoint.
Right. Recently, they fixed loose handrails, and then sometimes there's a big chip or a crack in a step that gets reported, and their crew goes out. So they're not all gigantic.
$50,000 doesn't seem to go far, you know, when you start getting a lot of costs. So what I'm hearing is that's just basically sidewalk. Does that mean these paths as well as anything in the city of Berkeley, or 50 just for these paths for the engineering division?
50 just for these paths.
For the engineering divisions. And then there's for maintenance, clearing debris. You mentioned signs and streetlights. There's a cost to those. I'm assuming that comes to it from another pot, not from engineering, but another general fund that may be parks. Is there another funding?
No, signage lighting, that would still fall under that same pot. I think there's a little confusion over the one-time funding we received from a budget referral, the 150K, which was specific to lighting, signage, handrails, where in normal years without that one-time funding, we would likely spend out of that 50 after that from that smaller bucket for those kinds of things.
Yeah. And
Guess
just
that,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Tony. For that, yeah, I think I understand you use the 50,000 to maybe put more wayfinding sign or put lighting in. But how about the ongoing maintenance of that light, like how it's power and if you had to switch out the light bulb and things like that? Does that come from that 50,000 or is there's another pot of money for those energy costs and so forth?
Well, we don't have very many paths with lights. There's maybe one that I can think of, and we were just talking about it, Charlie and Janet, in one of our meetings. So, you know, I don't even know. Yeah, it would come out of that bucket if it was along the path. There are lights that are sort of auxiliary to the path, they're more on the main stretch road, that would be a different bucket, if that answers your question.
Can I interject something here? I'm the head of the path building crew. We're out every Monday and Wednesday morning for 2 hours. These are several retired people. And our most common problem we're having is these wooden steps that are set on the ground and they're rotting, you know, from just years and years of, you know, wet soil around them. And we get complaints about replacing them and replacing them. A new step cost somewhere in the near around $23. They're made out of eucalyptus wood. And so we do fundraising at Path Wanderers, and all that replacement of steps comes out of our own fundraising. So that's the main event when you talk about, you know, like week to week maintenance. That's what's happening now.
I put a link in the chat to the paths budget that we developed. And we have a line item for things like lighting, you know, adding lighting that's needed, because a lot of the paths are just pitch black at night. And one thing that we haven't talked about at all is emergency evacuation. And the city is increasingly recognizing how critical the paths are for evacuation in the case of a fire or other emergency. The city has been purchasing our maps to give out at emergency fairs. And, you know, I think the fire funds is an area of spending that we, you know, it would be, I don't know what the word is, but we're sort of hoping that the city will look to the fires fund to do some of these things, like put in handrails that were really, and lighting that would really be critical. You don't want people getting in their cars when there's a wildfire. You want them to walk down the fastest way.
That's been a discussion in Kensington as well with the fire district. Some folks there may be interested in this. What has been, this is to the city, the relationship between ADA issues and use of the paths for evacuation? This is I wanted to hear more from Berkeley about how it's approached that issue.
Can you repeat that one more time, John? It was
sort of the relationship between whether use of the paths for evacuation triggers greater ADA requirements.
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah, and not that I'm aware of either.
Yeah,
that was an issue that our public works raised. So you're saying in Berkeley that if using the paths for ADA doesn't for evacuation doesn't raise more ADA issues.
It shouldn't. That would be like saying, you know, sidewalk is used more over here, so it should be more ADA compliant than this sidewalk over here. We try to make everything as compliant as we can.
What was your summary on ADA issues?
The terrain exemption usually covers it, exception, because they're 10 feet wide and they're too steep to meet the ADA, you know, a wheelchair accessible route. And then if you can't build it at all, then nobody can use it.
So the city of Berkeley Public Works folks agree with that?
Correct. So the terrain is the #1 exception. The second being if we use unskilled volunteer labor, the construction practices used there would not be expected to meet compliance with ADA. So
we're okay. You're okay with that. And so our public works folks, then just you agree?
I guess
some of our folks, all these ADA issues, and I want to see what you're feeling.
Yeah, maybe if I may ask in a different way, see if it result in different answer from Terrence, is that do you view you know, right now a lot of times we use trail immunity to reduce the liability, so we prefer to call them recreation trail. And versus if we call them emergency evacuation route, then we feel like then that there's a higher standard, and that's really the issue that was raised. So maybe not, perhaps not ADA, but it's that differences of what kind of
let me
immunity
just say,
means
I
for liability.
as a former lawyer, I hear so much you can't do this and you can't do that from
Right.
the lawyers and risk management, and everything is sort of a risk issue. So I want to be clear here with our public works team about this. So if the belief is that let's take step one, that the paths would come within some exceptions to ADA. Do our folks, Jocelyn, agree with that?
I think that we can look at it definitely that we can pursue an 88 exemptions again on the terrain. I think we know that on a given, but once we have what I hear, and I wanted to hear more, was when you start labeling it officially as an evacuation route, it's not necessarily public works that comes into play, but also our fire and our safety people. It's one thing to say this is available versus officially calling it that.
So what does Berkeley do?
I think there's an important distinction here. I mean, when the city builds a new concrete path, you have to build it up to code. You have to put the handrails on both sides, and right, Terrence?
But that doesn't help ADA.
Well,
if you're in a wheelchair, you can.
Yeah, I know, but
so.
but I mean, you'd have to be up to code for a staircase.
So what I mean is there's a difference really is if we deploy government to do these things when we have to build it to a certain standards versus if we have volunteers, then the threshold is really less, as long as the city or the county basically stay out of what's going on.
Yeah, but the volunteers don't build a concrete step. Like, there are concrete paths in Kensington. I've been on them and they're crumbling and they desperately need handrails. So for whatever reason, that doesn't have to do with the volunteers.
I'd like to hear
public access. It's a sidewalk issue, really.
I'd like to hear what the supervisor asked in regard to our existing paths. And I think Jocelyn, he was asking you a specific question, and I don't want to get, for our benefit from Kensington's standpoint, we're not going to build new ones. So existing paths, what are the issues that the county sees with the existing paths?
Something we haven't touched on is right of way. So that's one of the major issues we have is the right of way, and none of them are within public road right of way or any right of way dedicated to a public entity such as ourselves. And I'm not familiar with City of Berkeley.
Well, but Jocelyn, remember what we're talking about is once we figure out which paths we want to, move to public ownership, whether it's the county or the community services district, and we identify through surveying. So let's assume we've gotten beyond all that. Remember, we're assuming that these paths are going to be in public ownership. So I'm assuming that. That's the whole purpose of why we're together, right? Is to study that.
Exactly, yes.
Whichever agency. So I guess I'm trying to say, let's assume they're county, or let's assume they're county, for example. It could be community services. Answer that question with regard to that. And it does say, so Janet says all the paths in Berkeley are public rights of way. So the city owns those paths, are you saying?
Yes.
Berkeley, do you own all those paths?
Yes, they're all in the right of way.
And how did you get those over time? See, our situation is they were offered for dedication 100 years ago by the developers and never accepted by the county. So technically the owners are the successor in interest to the developers 100 years later, and we don't know where they are. They're not around. So one of the things we're doing is we'll identify through surveys and working with property owners how to identify the alignment of the path and then take whatever legal mechanism to transfer them into public ownership. So
Yeah.
I guess to our public works folks, you know, if so, we were talking about how, you know, how do it sounds like one, we can use an exemption to ADA. Is that right, Jocelyn?
I think we were going down that road anyways, because we
Okay.
knew none of them were going to
Okay,
be.
so second, if we say to the public, oh, they can be used for evacuation, but they're not an official evacuation route, you know, how does that, that doesn't trigger ADA? Let me ask two questions, the ADA question and then the standards question. So it's not triggered by ADA? Does it trigger ADA?
If that's a question for me, that not to my knowledge. I've never heard of that, but if someone can find something otherwise.
I don't know what does our team say?
I don't mind.
The Berkeley paths aren't.
No, I'm asking sort of public work, our county public works, Contra Costa.
So my opinion, and you know, Jocelyn could obviously chime in, is I think we're on the same page as with Berkeley that in terms of the paths, the approach is you're not going to build them to a wheelchair standard. It's still going to be compliant with ADA under an exception that ADA affords. We appreciate that, you know, that it's too steep, it would be very costly, you don't have the space. That meets ADA, but it doesn't create a wheelchair accessible route, right?
Right.
We all agree on that. And I appreciate that Terrence brought up this other approach of using volunteer labor that gives some exceptions. We can look into that. That's definitely something worth looking into. And the paths, you know, accepted, even built with stairs, you still have a responsibility under ADA to still try to make it as accessible as possible without causing it to cost way too much or taking 4 houses out. So sometimes that applies to putting a handrail in, because not everything is just wheelchair accessibility. There's other, just, you know, like the visual impaired, you see the yellow dots, all these different things still would apply. So you have the ADA element. Supervisor Dory, you bring up, and the Berkeley brought up the fire escape issue. We understand it's a common thing. So Jason and I both used to work in Orinda. It's same fire concerns. And the approach would be there is, look, if it's ADA compliant, it's ADA compliant. It just, you know, doesn't meet the wheelchair. Now, what Jason was bringing up is there is this concern of if we are getting immunities for trip and fall liabilities under a recreational use, and we want to utilize that, if we're now using these for broader than recreation use, then you have potential liability. Now, the county can decide what they want to do with that liability. That's up to them. And I think it's just out there that we want you to be aware of, but I don't think it.
Yeah, let me just say, every
you
time
make it a
someone
fire.
mentions a liability issue, my answer is Contra Costa County runs a hospital and 11 health clinics and a jail and a sheriff's department, all of which have extremely higher liability risks than a path. And I say this all the time to Public Works. They know that. So we know, here's my perspective. It's good to understand the risk, but the risk is not, in my mind, a reason to not do it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a jail, and we wouldn't have a hospital, and we wouldn't have playgrounds, and we wouldn't have childcare centers.
You.
Okay, right.
Your trail immunity with a less likely avenue. So the ability to just say, so you're going to have trip and fall claim, and you got to deal with that. And I would ask, does Berkeley get trip and fall claims on these situations? And hopefully you don't get a lot, so then we all feel a little bit better. So I don't know, Terrence, you've not been there that long, but.
Yeah, I just want to say the last question we haven't gotten to was, over the past 10 years, do you know the number of lawsuits related to paths and the outcome of those?
Yes.
I don't know if you know that, Terrence, but yeah, I know on the Path Wanderers side, we're covered under Berkeley Partners for Parks for liability. And we have never had a lawsuit related to volunteers working on the paths or
And
any-
so
any
Terrence, what has been your experience
Or we
in
lead a lot
Berkeley?
of walks, like we
Right.
lead walks on the paths, we've never been sued.
Terrence, what has
Yeah,
been
but
the
this-
experience in Berkeley?
Yeah.
I have not known of any lawsuits related to any paths, specifically trip and falls. I have not heard about anything related to that.
Yeah.
So I think for our public works folks, we know there's a risk. We know it can happen. And at least the local experience in our neighbor in Berkeley is it's been pretty minimal.
And
That's
I-
what I heard
I
40
would-
Larry, Larry, you wanted to say something, Larry?
I had one follow-up question, Terrence, that's important to me is that you mentioned the volunteer use, and that gives you some, exemption from ADA when the volunteer group is installing the facility. But I heard in this conversation, when it gets to a concrete level, are you putting together a set of plans, bidding it out, getting construction, prevailing wage, and do those not get the exception for the volunteer use? You might still use the other exceptions. Is that how you approach it for like a concrete type path?
Correct.
Okay.
When the
So
compliance
that
is
would
not
be my
achievable-
understanding too.
Yeah.
Has the city been sued in the recent memory over any of the paths or
No,
had claims?
No,
No.
I've checked with the police department and the fire department and city council, and nobody is aware of any lawsuit any time that they ever heard of. So certainly not in the last 25 years, and probably not a long time before that.
Terrence, what about sidewalk, just sidewalk? How often is the city sued for sidewalk
Yes.
issues?
Because
the
I wouldn't say
paths are
pretty
inside-
often, but it probably works out to
Right.
be, 1 or 2 every month.
So you get sued more for sidewalks than paths.
Yes.
All right, Jocelyn, hear that?
Yeah.
Make
So
everything a
I guess I'm
path.
saying I don't want Public Works to say, well, we got this liability issue, we're gonna do this. We know it's an issue. The question is, are we willing to assume that risk, or the community services district for that matter, whoever takes it on?
Limited time, so I really appreciate you guys bringing us together. And a couple questions more for Terrence. In terms of your $50,000 budget, I'm assuming you're not planning for a capital replacement cost. You're not like saying, okay, we're going to be replacing all these things in 25 years, so you need to save up. That's not the case, right?
No.
No. Okay, that's fine. I mean, most CIPs are that way. When and just to let the rest of the Kensington group know, some of the numbers we did was planning for that in accordance, right? You don't have to put that in. Obviously, you might get 25 years from now and you just got to replace it and you got to come up with the money. That's one other element. How long have you budgeted this program? I mean, has it been like 20 years? Has it been a recent thing? It seems very well formalized, which is great, but how long has it been running?
Yeah, so as far as I know, speaking to the guy that was my predecessor, he had it from early 2000s on. There was a break in time from him to me, so it kind of went by the wayside, unfortunately. So that $50,000 a year for some time was not actually used. It wasn't until I took it over in 2021, 2020, where I tried to get things going again. Like I said, I managed both the sidewalk program and the path, so they're kind of one and the same. Obviously, we spend more on sidewalk because there's more of it, and it's more of a liability thing. We believe by taking care of more sidewalks, we're decreasing our liability, etc. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And the other, my last question, in terms of your, I guess you've had this budget for 50,000. How do you how are you choosing when to spend it? Like, what's your mechanism are you meeting with the group and then say, okay, all right, this time we're going to do this?
So
it sounds like it's not always spent, so that's why I'm curious how it's being picked and choose to.
Going back to the path condition report, that's the report that Berkeley Path Wanderers puts out. They go out there and do proactive inspections on all the paths within, I think, a single day. They deploy volunteers and they come out with this report, which we use as a starting point. And it's sort of like a wish list. And I meet regularly with Berkeley Path Wanderers to sort of build that wish list.
Okay.
And then, it's up to the city to decide, okay, where's our money best spent? Obviously with input from path wanderers and other stakeholders.
Has the city accepted all the whatever 140 paths, into its sort of right away that they formally accepted them? Or
I didn't get to finish answering that question from before, but so it was dedicated to the city, probably the same time it was dedicated to the county. And I believe 1910 or 1920, around there, we accepted all the dedications that had been done up to that point through an ordinance. And that's sort of how we gained the public right away.
It's like a blanket. Gotcha.
Right, a blanket, exactly. So.
All right. Good to know. Thank you.
Well, I have to get going, but
I just want to say before Terrence goes, we just want to say we love you.
Me?
So let me just thank Terrence. So let me
you.
ask, I'd like to suggest that maybe Terrence, before you leave, if you'd be willing to have a separate discussion, Public Works to Public Works with our team, where they could maybe talk through other specific questions that they have going forward. And Jocelyn and Terrence, you guys have each other's information?
If it's in the email, then we should have it.
Okay, I'll reach out to you with your email.
All right, Jocelyn. Good to meet you.
Yeah, I mean, I
Meet
think,
you and everyone else.
let me ask our folks, do you see other questions you want to ask about this? What's your sense?
I have a quick question. So this
I know,
bond
just excuse me, Cass, I know Terrence, you have a hard stop to pick up your.
Hard stop, so yeah, I gotta get
just
going.
want to give you an out, because when we arranged this.
I appreciate that, Lisa. Thank you. Well, you can always reach me by email if you have any questions, or we can set up another meeting. I don't
Bye,
mind.
Terrence.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Right.
Sorry, Cass, please.
Okay, so that $5 million bond measure, is that in the works? You guys are now trying to put that on the next ballot?
No,
That's not a bond. That's just a wish list.
Yeah, I mean, we had, when Berkeley was looking at a bond measure, Measure L, a few years ago, we put together a
It's
list
just-
of all the things we think. It's aspirational. It's 100% aspirational.
That's the wish list.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And but the city consulted with us on it. Like, actually our amount was much lower than what they came up with, but Terrence reviewed our list and did a spreadsheet, and
But that bond issue didn't pass.
It didn't pass.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it got 60%.
So we don't need to discuss it in great detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also another question about the exception for the terrain. You said something about if it's an 8% grade, or.
Well, I can't
what
remember
is
the percent.
detail?
You can look at the ADA, you can find the whole ADA thing online, and you can find the terrain thing.
Any ramp that slopes greater than 8.33% doesn't comply with ADA.
Okay.
And then technically it needs to be 5% or less unless you have landings that are every roughly 30 feet. So if it's 5% to 8 1/3%, then you need to have those landings. So when you see curb ramps, or a lot of times it's more applicable to, like, say, a ramp going up to a building entry door. That's where you'll see the 8 1/3.
Right.
So if you had a slope that's more than 5%, just forget ADA, is that, am I reading?
It matters how wide it is. We shouldn't discuss the ADA stuff in detail here. I don't think. It's online.
I would agree. I don't.
You need help with
It
that.
needs to go. Yeah, you have to go through the exception process. We recognize this project, this Kensington and this county is not looking to redo the whole path to then make it compliant. That's not going to work. So we fully recognize it. We have to document the exceptions and say why you can't do it. Otherwise, when someone potentially sues you over ADA, not necessarily trip and fall, that you have the right reasonings why you didn't have to construct it the way it is. You're still compliant because you made the exception.
So Zion has a question, and then Lisa.
Thanks. And I agree, Charlie, that maybe we're getting too far in the weeds with some of these ADA questions. I have a higher level question about determining how you prioritize maintenance tasks and projects. And I'm curious if you have some sort of standardized criteria you use to prioritize or identify.
It's quite random. And sometimes it's driven by if an adjacent neighbor moves in and says, hey, there's a path next to me, but I can't find it. If, you know, we'll go and look at that one. Occasionally the fire department has said they were dealing with a fire and there was a path next to it, but the path didn't exist. And they inquired, are we gonna ever build it? So it's some combination of, you know, what comes up, maybe a little bit different parts of town. It's vague.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob, do you want to speak to that, Bob?
Yeah, we have a reporting address on our website, and people use it, and they point out, you know, paths that need repair. And I make a list, and we're constantly deciding which one to do. It's quite a big task because of like the current situation of old paths and rotting wood. So, you know.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the need is really great. I mean, when we have money to buy a handrail, it's like, it's actually really difficult to decide which one should go next, because we need somewhere around 55 handrails, you know. And I put a link, we have a thing on our website, report a problem, and people do tell us about things really regularly.
Yeah.
So like the handrail or the railroad tie or the trail wood blocks, when those get replaced, you guys are using the sort of the donation money to take it out of your budget to fix those yourselves, right? As a volunteer group.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the repair.
You guys sound like a very heavily involved financially and your own labor doing the work.
I mean, we started as a volunteer group, you know,
but people love the
we still
paths. Yeah. I mean, we started small in 1998 or something, and people love the paths, and they also really like if the money they give, they see a change, like new handrails came, new steps got installed. They're pretty willing to give more money the next year. So
Charlie, would you say like mostly when we built new paths, mostly people have been for it?
No, I would not say that. I'd say 50-50.
Okay.
There's often somebody who's totally opposed, somebody who's in favor, and a couple of neighbors. There's usually 4 neighbors, 2 on the top, 2 on the bottom, and 2 that really don't care. So, but it varies. People don't like change.
How much are you guys, if you don't mind me asking, how much are you guys typically raising, maybe on an annual basis, and how much are you spending to because there's a lot of paths in Berkeley.
Yeah.
So
we're raising right now we're raising around $60,000 to $70,000 a year.
Wow. That's pretty good.
And we're trying to spend it all on handrails. You know, it's
so, you know, that's, you know, obviously I think you said, I heard 140 paths or segments out there. So I mean that's very impressive, you know, because I do think, you know, just replacing simple things like you know, I don't mean to make it sound too small, but the day-to-day things adds up, and that's why, you know, to have a funding source is key, right? And so it sounds like you're getting donations, and then there is a group that's making a decision as to what to spend it on, which is great. I'm assuming like a 501c or something.
We're 501c3 sponsored. We're fiscally sponsored by Berkeley Partners for Parks. We're not we're not our own group.
But people's donations are tax deductible, charitable contributions.
Yeah, looks like Lisa had a question.
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're running a little bit over. I just wanted to really say, I mean, getting everybody together, all the path wanderers, all the work you've done for decades, along with the county staff who are working hard on this. I just wanted to thank you all, and especially John and Robert for pulling this path committee together before we ran out of time. I think it's really so informative for everybody. And, you know, we have a lot to understand and learn, and I really appreciate just the time that everybody's put into coming.
So in terms of next steps, I mean, I'd like to figure out here, you know, let me ask our public works team, have you found this useful in thinking through some issues, and what do you see as next steps?
I thought it was very helpful. I think one of the things that I'd like to do is pick Terrence's brain and maybe schedule a meeting with getting into the details of how their funding structure and how they're doing their maintenance operation CIP, and then bring in Jason and Larry and meet with with Terrence with the city of Berkeley.
Okay.
And then I kind of have a question of how does the park and recs folks come into play with the city of Berkeley, as well as this Berkeley Partners for Parks.
Great. Okay. Do we have any other kinds of questions from anybody here today?
No. One thing I'd say is the fact that you have these Kensington path keepers who've been involved in pushing and working for so many years. I think that you would also find, if there was a paths effort, that Kensington residents would donate money too, because the same way as in Berkeley, we had no idea we'd get so much money, but
well, Kensington residents
Kensington's
already
a
have.
smaller community, it can, than Berkeley, and so the fundraising base will be smaller.
We already have like $6,000 that we had raised previously through the Kensington Improvement Club. So we know we can do. You know, like I said,
don't have as many paths.
You guys are our role models. We would definitely be following in your footsteps, and that's why today's conversation was so valuable, because this is not just theory now. This is what really happens, boots on the paths, so to speak.
So Rodney, are you guys a 501c3 nonprofit already?
We're not. We've been trying to get that, and there's a Kensington organization that possibly could do that for us, but it hasn't happened yet.
I would encourage you to name the paths. Like
don't even open that can of worms, Janet.
I mean, I think like
they've had numbers and they had names,
path number
and
6.
now they have numbers again. So
that's true.
So anything we want to, I think it sounds like our public works are going to reach out to Berkeley Public Works, and this is helpful. And then I think we should regroup and have a meeting with our county public works to sort of talk through some, you know, remember, you know, I think what you had suggested earlier was a lot more sort of concrete and formal than we wanted, and talk through and have a new, and I really want to move this along as quickly as possible. You know, we spent a lot of good time, but I really want us to try to get a meeting together, Jocelyn, as quickly as possible after you've met with Berkeley. Can we do that?
Yep. I'll reach out to Terrence right away and see when his
let's get a meeting if we can in early January.
Yep. And then
can that be our goal?
Yep. And then I'll coordinate with Robert Rogers as well as Cynthia on your schedule.
Great.
And get something online.
You also, for us, it's been quite important and useful to have the fire department being major advocates for improving the paths.
We'll talk to fire about it. Yes.
I don't know, if yours would be the same, but.
Yeah, we can talk to Kensington Fire.
Yeah. Also vegetation management. You know, I know they have a pot of money for clearing vegetation.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank you, everyone. That
was good. Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Good luck. It's really exciting.
I walk the Berkeley paths all the time.
Uh-huh.
We do too. Okay, bye-bye.